It begins with a whisper carried on the cold wind, a sound so faint you might mistake it for the rustle of leaves or the sigh of the night itself. But in Mexico, where the earth remembers every drop of blood spilled and every tear shed, whispers are rarely just the wind. They are the voices of the past, calling out from somewhere between this world and the next. I tell you now, if you listen too closely, you might just hear them calling your name. Tonight, you will walk with me down narrow cobblestone streets where the lanterns flicker without warning, where the shadows grow long and twist into shapes that don't belong to the living. You will feel the presence of eyes upon you from places you cannot see, and your breath will catch when you realize you are no longer walking alone. I will take you through the darkness to hear the oldest stories Mexico has kept alive, the ones told in hushed voices around a fire, the ones parents use to keep their children from wandering too far after sunset. But these are not just stories. Some say they are warnings, and others say they are traps. The first tale begins near a river. It is always near water, for water remembers everything. They say if you stand too close to its edge after midnight, the current will carry to you the sound of someone crying, not the wail of an animal, nor the drunken weeping of a lonely man, but the piercing, heart-wrenching sobs of a woman in agony. Her voice rises and falls like the tide, and it chills the marrow in your bones. This is the voice of La Llorona, the weeping woman. They say she was once a beautiful young woman, known for her grace and the way her laughter could light up a room. She fell in love with a wealthy man, a man whose eyes sparkled with promises he would never keep. Against the warnings of her family, she gave him her heart. She bore him children, 2, some say 3, and for a time, it seemed she was the happiest woman alive. But wealth is a fickle lover. One day, the man grew distant. He began to spend his time away, whispering sweet words to another woman. When La Llorona discovered his betrayal, something inside her shattered. Some say she lost her mind. Others say the devil whispered in her ear. Whatever the truth, one dark night, she led her children to the riverbank. The moon hid behind thick clouds as if unwilling to witness what would happen next. Her hands trembled, her breath came in ragged gasps, but her eyes were cold, empty. She took the children, one by one, and pushed them into the black water. Their screams were swallowed by the current, and soon there was only silence, until she realized what she had done. Her wails tore through the night, a sound so raw and full of despair that even the animals in the forest froze where they stood. She ran along the river, plunging her hands into the water, searching for the little faces she would never see again. When morning came, the villagers found her lifeless body on the bank, her wet hair clinging to her pale skin, her mouth still open in a silent scream. But death did not bring her peace. They say her spirit rose, cursed to wander the earth in search of her children. On nights when the moon hides and the air grows heavy, her cry echoes across valleys and through the streets of sleeping towns. Ay, mis hijos, oh my children. If you hear her close, you must run far, for it means she is far away. But if her voice sounds distant, she may be standing right behind you. Many have claimed to see her. A tall, thin woman in a white gown, her long hair streaming like riverweed, her face hidden in shadow. She glides rather than walks, and the air grows icy in her wake. Some say she lures children to the water to replace the ones she lost. Others say she is drawn to the grief in the hearts of the living. There are those who insist they have felt her cold fingers graze their shoulders before they turn to find no one there. I once spoke to a man who swore on his life he saw her near Lake Xochimilco. He had been drinking with friends late at night when he wandered from the group to relieve himself by the shore. That's when he heard it. A woman's voice, faint, weeping. At first, he thought it was a drunk woman who had fallen in, but when he stepped closer, he saw her. She was kneeling in the shallows, her white dress floating around her, her head bowed as she combed her long black hair with a silver comb. He called out to her, and she slowly turned her head toward him. He told me that what he saw was not a face, but a hollow void where her features should have been, like looking into the depths of the river itself. He ran without looking back, and to this day, he says he hears the sound of water dripping whenever he's alone. If you travel through Mexico, you will hear countless versions of La Llorona's tale, each twisted by the tongues of those who tell it. But all agree on one thing: her cry is a harbinger of death. You may escape her once, but if she has marked you sooner or later, she will find you. Yet, La Llorona is only one voice in the great chorus of Mexico's restless dead. There is another legend, older still, born in the days when the Aztecs ruled these lands. It is the story of the Nahual, a being who walks between the realms of man and beast. The Nahual is not a ghost, nor entirely human. In some villages, they are said to be shamans or witches, blessed or cursed, with the power to transform into animals. Coyotes, jaguars, owls, even black dogs with eyes like burning coals. They can slip between forms at will, their bones bending, their skin stretching, their bodies reshaping under the cloak of darkness. In the old days, the Nahualis were guardians, protectors of their people. But over time, greed and malice twisted some of them into predators. There's a small town in Oaxaca where they still lock their doors tight after sundown, not for fear of thieves, but for fear of the Nahual. They say one walks among them even now, wearing the face of a man by day and the skin of a jaguar by night. Livestock is found torn apart in the morning, their blood drained as if by some unholy thirst. Chickens vanish from locked coops, and dogs whimper and hide when the sun dips below the hills. An old woman once told me she had seen him herself. She woke in the middle of the night to the sound of claws scratching at her window. When she peered out, she saw a massive black jaguar, its eyes glowing in the dark. But what froze her blood was the grin, a grin far too human to belong to any animal. She crossed herself and whispered a prayer, and the creature slowly backed into the shadows, never breaking its gaze from hers. The Nahual is said to be able to curse those who cross him, striking them with illness or misfortune. Some claim you can spot one in human form by looking into their eyes. If the pupils flash like an animal's when caught in the light, you must turn away. Others believe that if you can wound the beast, the human it becomes will bear the same injury, and that is how you can expose them. But be warned, if you fail to kill it, the Nahual will hunt you to the ends of the earth. These stories are not confined to dusty old books or the imaginations of the superstitious. They breathe in the streets, in the rivers, in the mountains of Mexico. Every village, every city has its own shadows, its own names whispered when the fire burns low. And as we journey deeper into the night, we come to the third of our tales. We come to the third of our tales, one that seeps into your bones like the damp chill of a grave. It is a story of hunger, not the hunger for food, but the hunger for souls. The legend of El Charro Negro. He is a figure you may mistake at first for a man of flesh and blood, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in the elegant black suit of a Mexican horseman, his silver buttons gleaming even in the faintest light. His wide-brimmed sombrero casts his face in shadow, but when he lifts his head, his eyes glint with something that is not human. They say he rides a magnificent black stallion, its hooves silent on the road, its breath a cloud of frost, even in the summer heat. The story goes that El Charro Negro was once a man of great ambition. He wanted wealth, power, and respect, and he wanted them quickly. In his greed, he made a pact with something dark. Some say the devil himself, others say an ancient spirit far older. In exchange for his soul, he was granted all he desired. Gold poured into his pockets, women smiled upon him, and no door was closed to him. But the price of such bargains is never paid in full until the end. When death came for him, it did not take him to the afterlife. Instead, he was cursed to wander the earth, seeking to settle his debt by collecting the souls of others. He appears on lonely roads at night, offering help to weary travelers. Sometimes he rides alongside you in silence. Other times he engages you in friendly conversation. His voice is warm, persuasive, and it lulls you into trust. Eventually, he offers you gold, a handful of gleaming coins, more than enough to change your fortune. But once you accept them, they turn to ash in your hands and your soul is his. I met a farmer in Guerrero who claimed to have seen him one rainy night. The man had been walking home from the market, the storm soaking him to the skin, when he heard the sound of hooves behind him. Turning, he saw El Charro Negro riding slowly toward him, unbothered by the rain, his clothes as dry as if he'd been standing in the sun. The rider tipped his hat in greeting and offered the farmer a ride home. Grateful, the farmer climbed up behind him, but as the horse began to gallop, the road beneath them vanished. He looked down and saw they were riding across nothing. The earth was gone, replaced by a vast black void. Panicked, the farmer closed his eyes and began to pray. When he opened them, he was lying in the mud at the edge of his village, the sound of hooves fading into the distance. In his pocket, he found a single gold coin, which crumbled into dust the moment he touched it. Some say El Charro Negro is not entirely evil. If you refuse his offer politely, thanking him but asking for nothing, he will tip his hat and leave you unharmed. But refuse him with arrogance, or try to mock him, and you will vanish without a trace, your name remembered only in whispered warnings to children. There is a town in Jalisco where people still leave small offerings at crossroads, a glass of water, a coin, a sprig of herbs, hoping to appease the dark rider and keep him from knocking at their doors. No one there travels alone at night, and if they must, they carry a rosary or a blessed charm. They say faith can shield you from him, but only if your faith is stronger than your fear. Fear. It is the thread that ties all these stories together. Not the cheap fear of a sudden noise in the dark, but the deep, creeping dread that grows when you realize the world you know is not the only one that exists. There are things that walk beside us, unseen, until the moment they choose to be seen. And once you see them, you can never unsee them. The fourth tale is one that carries with it the stench of decay, for it comes from the realm of the dead. It is the legend of La Pascualita, the corpse bride of Chihuahua. The story begins in a small bridal shop in the city of Chihuahua in the 1930s. The shop was owned by a woman named Pascuala Esparza, and one day, the town was abuzz with the arrival of a new mannequin in her store window. She was unlike any mannequin anyone had ever seen. Her skin had a delicate texture. Her hair was so fine and natural. Her eyelashes so perfect that people swore she could blink at any moment. Her glassy eyes seemed to follow you as you walked past, and her hands were so detailed, with faint lines, wrinkles, and even tiny fingernails, that they looked more like those of a living person than a doll. Whispers began to spread. Some claimed she was not a mannequin at all, but the embalmed body of Pascuala's own daughter, who had died tragically on her wedding day after being bitten by a venomous spider. The grieving mother, unable to let her go, had preserved her body and dressed her in the bridal gown she had never worn down the aisle. No one could prove it, but the detail was too perfect, the presence too unsettling. Over the years, people began to notice strange things. At night, passers-by swore they saw her change positions in the window. A slight tilt of the head, a shift in the placement of her hands. Employees in the store reported feeling her eyes on them as they worked, and some refused to be alone with her. Brides-to-be who tried on dresses under her gaze often had nightmares that very night, dreams in which La Pascualita whispered in their ears or reached out to touch their veils with cold fingers. One seamstress told me she had to fix the mannequin's dress late one evening. As she adjusted the hem, she felt a faint movement, as if the mannequin's leg had shifted. She laughed nervously, telling herself it was her imagination, until she looked up and saw the faintest curve of a smile on La Pascualita's lips. She dropped her scissors and ran. The legend says that if you stare into her eyes for too long, she will steal your soul, trapping it behind the glass of her gaze. Others believe she walks the streets of Chihuahua at night, searching for grooms to replace the one she lost. And some say that on the anniversary of her death, her spirit returns to her preserved body for a single night, and she dances in the moonlight, waiting for someone foolish enough to join her. Whether La Pascualita is a marvel of craftsmanship or something far more sinister, one thing is certain: Once you see her, you will never forget her face. And yet there is one more tale to tell before the night swallows us whole. The last story of this night is one that rises from the mountains and valleys, carried on winds that taste of blood and earth. It is the legend of El Cadejo. In the highlands of Mexico and throughout Central America, people speak of the Cadejo in low, fearful tones. It is a spectral dog, or perhaps something that only wears the shape of a dog, that appears in the darkness to those who travel alone. There are two kinds, they say: the white Cadejo, a silent guardian that follows the lost and protects them from harm, and the black Cadejo, a demonic beast that stalks the weak and tempts them into ruin. But here in the more remote villages of southern Mexico, no one talks of the white one anymore. They say it vanished long ago, leaving only its shadow behind. Now, the black Cadejo roams freely. It is said to be the size of a calf, with matted fur as dark as a starless sky and eyes that glow like embers in the coals of a dying fire. Its smell is unforgettable, a mixture of sulfur, wet earth, and rotting flesh. Its footsteps make no sound, but if you listen closely, you may hear the faint clink of a chain dragging along the ground. No one knows if the chain binds it, or if it drags the chain as a reminder of what it has claimed. A miner once told me his encounter with it. He was returning from work late at night, the moon hidden by thick clouds, when he felt the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. At first, he thought it was the wind, but then he heard it, the chain. Slow, deliberate, scraping against the stones of the path. He turned, and there it was, the black Cadejo, standing in the middle of the road, its eyes fixed on him. He said it didn't move like a normal animal. Its body seemed to stretch and shrink with each step, its legs bending at angles that made no sense. It smiled at him. Yes, smiled, showing rows of jagged yellow teeth. The miner tried to run, but no matter how fast he moved, the Cadejo stayed the same distance behind him. He ran until his legs gave out, collapsing at the door of his home. His neighbors found him the next morning, trembling, his hair turned completely white. He never spoke again. Some claim the Cadejo is a cursed soul, doomed to wander until it drags enough victims to the underworld to earn its release. Others believe it is the devil himself, appearing in a form that preys on primal fears buried deep in human memory, the fear of the predator in the dark. There are ways, they say, to protect yourself. You can carry blessed salt and throw it in a circle around you. You can pray, though your voice will shake when you feel its breath on your neck. And in some versions of the tale, if you keep walking without acknowledging it, pretending not to see, it cannot touch you. But almost no one has the courage to try. A shepherd in Chiapas told me of a night when he walked home under a blood-red moon. He knew the path well, but halfway through, he saw two glowing eyes ahead. He thought it was a stray dog, until it stood up on its hind legs, its shape elongating, becoming something almost human, yet still covered in black fur. It stepped aside to let him pass, but as he walked by, it whispered his name in a voice that was neither male nor female, but something in between. He ran, and though nothing chased him, he swears he heard the chain until he reached the safety of his house. The Cadejo does not kill quickly. It follows, it waits. It drives its victims to madness, feeding on their fear until they are so broken they wander willingly into the shadows. And when they vanish, no one ever finds a body. Only the chain remains. And so, these are the legends whispered in the night, passed from tongue to tongue, generation to generation, surviving in the breath of those who still fear what waits beyond the reach of the firelight. They say stories keep the dead alive, but sometimes the dead need no help. They walk among us still, wrapped in shadow, waiting for the moment you are alone, when the road is empty and the night is heavy with silence. That is when you'll hear it, the cry, the hoofbeats, the whisper, the rustle of a dress, the drag of a chain, and by then, it will already be too late. Yet the night has a way of reminding us that its stories are never truly over. Just when you think you've heard the last whisper, when you believe the darkness has finally loosened its grip, something stirs again. That is how the old ones say it happens. The legends don't end, they wait. They bide their time until someone, somewhere, opens the door and invites them in. There are many more tales in Mexico's shadowed heart, ones you won't hear in tourist brochures or see printed neatly in books. These are passed quietly, often in kitchens at midnight over cups of bitter coffee, or during long walks where two people glance nervously at the shapes moving just outside the lantern's reach. The first of these new tales is born of earth and stone, and it begins in a cave so deep that even the sunlight dares not follow. This is the story of La Cueva del Diablo, the Devil's Cave. High in the hills near the state of Guerrero, there's a gaping black wound in the side of the mountain. The locals say that during the day, it is just an empty cavern, a hollow space filled with damp air and the distant sound of dripping water. But at night, when the sky bleeds into black, the cave breathes. People swear they've seen a warm red light glowing from deep within, and shadows moving as if something enormous was shifting just beyond sight. The legend tells of a miner named Ignacio, who once entered the cave searching for gold. His friends had warned him that no one who went too far inside ever returned, but greed dulls the ear to warnings. Carrying only a lantern and his pickaxe, Ignacio descended deeper and deeper into the earth. The walls around him began to shimmer with veins of precious metal, and his heart raced. He had found it. But as he swung his pick, the sound echoed strangely, returning to him in a voice that was not his own. "I can give you more than gold," it said. Ignacio froze, his breath caught in his throat. The voice was everywhere and nowhere, curling around him like smoke. He tried to turn back, but the passage had changed. The walls seemed closer now, the floor sloping downward into darkness. His lantern flickered, revealing brief glimpses, claws scratching the stone, horns curling into shadow, eyes burning with a light that hurt to look at. The voice offered him wealth, youth, and power, all in exchange for something small. "Just your shadow," it whispered. Desperate, Ignacio agreed. And from that day on, the people of his village noticed something strange. Ignacio cast no shadow, not in sunlight, not in the glow of a fire. For a time he prospered. His mine overflowed with gold, his home with fine things. But at night, people passing by swore they saw a dark shape following him, a shape that moved when he did not. Sometimes, they said, it was taller, and sometimes it crawled along the ground like an animal. Ignacio tried to ignore it until one night it stood in his doorway, grinning with a mouth too wide, and stepped inside. No one saw him again. The cave still waits, its mouth yawning open to the night. Some say the devil keeps the shadows he collects, and when the cave is full, he will let them spill out into the world. If you go there, the locals will warn you not to answer if you hear a voice in the dark, and if you feel something moving just behind you, whatever you do, do not look back. From the depths of the earth, our path now leads to the lonely shores of Lake Tziscao, on the border of Chiapas. It is there the water hides something far older than any town, far hungrier than any beast that walks on land. The people call it La Serpiente de Tziscao. It begins like a fisherman's tale. The water is deep and black, the kind of black that swallows the light before it can touch the bottom. Fishermen speak of days when the catch is plentiful and nights when something massive moves beneath their boats, rocking them gently, almost playfully. But there are other nights when the moon hides and the wind stills, when a low hum vibrates through the water and the ripples move against the current. Long ago, the Mayan people told of a great serpent that lived in the lake, a guardian of a doorway to another world. When angered, it would rise from the depths, its body glistening with scales as big as shields, its eyes like molten gold. Some say it is not a serpent at all, but a spirit that takes the shape of one to drive away the unworthy. The last recorded sighting was told to me by a park ranger who had patrolled the lake for over 20 years. He said it was late, close to midnight, when he noticed a small fishing boat adrift near the center of the lake. As he rowed closer, he realized it was empty. No nets, no gear, no sign of the fisherman who had taken it. Then the water beneath his own boat began to rise, lifting him as if something enormous passed directly below. He saw a coil thicker than the trunk of a ceiba tree slide through the water, and then the eye. A single golden eye, looking straight at him before vanishing into the depths. The boat he'd found was later pulled to shore. Inside, the wood was scarred with deep gouges, as if something with massive claws had tried to pull it apart. The fishermen who had owned it were never seen again. They say the serpent sleeps most of the year, but when it wakes, the lake becomes a hunting ground. If you see the ripples moving against the wind, leave at once. If you hear the hum beneath the water, do not speak, for it is said the serpent can hear your voice and will remember it until it finds you. And now, we move to a story that has no single place, for it has walked the streets of many cities, from Veracruz to Mexico City. This is the tale of La Carreta de la Muerte, the death cart. It comes without warning, in the hour when the streets are empty and the air feels thick, as if holding its breath. Those who have seen it say the cart is old, its wood splintered and dark, its wheels groaning as it moves. Sometimes it is pulled by black mules with eyes as pale as milk, sometimes by no visible force at all. At the reins sits a figure in a tattered cloak, its face hidden, its hands nothing but bone. The sound of the wheels is said to be the first sign, a slow, rhythmic creak that grows louder as it approaches. And then comes the smell, a choking stench of decay that clings to you even after it has passed. The cart does not come for the living at random. It is said to appear outside the home of someone who will die before sunrise. Neighbors have reported waking to the sound of wheels on cobblestones, peering through their windows, and seeing the cart stop at a door. The cloaked driver dismounts, knocks once, and when the door opens, both the driver and the person vanish into the cart, which rolls silently away. By morning, the house is empty. An old night watchman in Veracruz swore he saw it once. He had been making his rounds when the air grew unnaturally cold. From the far end of the street came the creak of wheels. The cart emerged from the fog, the driver's empty sockets fixed on him. The watchman crossed himself, but the cart passed him without slowing, heading straight for a house 3 doors down. He heard the knock, the door open, and then nothing. The next morning, the family who lived there was gone. Some believe you can protect yourself by drawing a line of salt across your doorway, others by reciting a prayer when you hear the wheels. But the truth is, no one knows for sure. And if you should see it pass by, the best thing you can do is stay inside, stay silent, and pray the cart is not coming for you. From the haunting sound of wheels on cobblestone, our journey drifts to a place where the line between the living and the dead is thin enough to tear. In the mountains of Oaxaca lies a small village known to few outsiders, where every November, the dead are not just remembered, they are welcomed. But one year something else answered the invitation. They call it El Invitado Oscuro, the dark guest. During Dia de Muertos, families in this village prepare elaborate altars filled with marigolds, sugar skulls, candles, and plates of the favorite foods of their departed. It is a celebration of life, not a mourning of death. People believe the spirits of loved ones return to enjoy these offerings, and for one night, the veil between worlds is lifted. But the elders warn of an old rule. The offerings must only be for those you knew in life. Never place something on your altar for a stranger, for you cannot know what will come to claim it. The story goes that one young woman, eager to honor all souls, left an extra plate of mole and bread at the far end of her altar, saying aloud, "For anyone who is hungry." That night, she awoke to the sound of someone eating in her kitchen. She thought it was her uncle. His favorite dish had always been mole. But when she looked through the doorway, she saw a tall figure dressed in black, with a face so pale it seemed carved from wax. Its eyes were deep pits, and every bite it took left the bread blackened and crumbling, as if burnt. It looked up at her, and in a voice like dry leaves, it said, "Thank you." Then it walked past her, leaving a trail of ash, and vanished into the night. The next day, her neighbors found her wandering the streets in a daze. She could not speak, and she never entered her home again. To this day, people in that village leave their offerings only for those they can name, whispering the names as they place each item on the altar, just in case something else is listening. From the mountains of Oaxaca, our path twists toward the hot, humid lands of Tabasco, where rivers cut through thick jungle and the nights buzz with the chorus of unseen creatures. But among those calls, there is one sound the blood, the soft echoing cry of a baby. This is the legend of La Llorona de Agua Clara. You've likely heard of La Llorona, the weeping woman who roams riversides searching for the children she drowned. But in Agua Clara, the story is different. Here, she does not walk. She floats just above the water, her hair spreading out like black seaweed, her gown drifting without touching the surface. A fisherman named Raoul once told his story to anyone who would listen, though he always spoke in a low voice, as if afraid she might hear. He had been out on the river past sunset, against his better judgment, when he heard it, the faint sound of a baby crying. Thinking someone had been abandoned, he paddled toward the sound, calling out. The crying stopped. Then out of the corner of his eye, he saw her, a pale woman in white, holding something wrapped in cloth. Her face was beautiful, but her eyes were wrong. Too wide, too dark, like they were filled with water instead of life. She beckoned to him. Against his will, Raoul found himself rowing closer until he could see the bundle in her arms. It moved, and a tiny pale hand reached out, but as he touched it, it crumbled into wet sand. The woman screamed, a sound so sharp it pierced his skull, and the river surged, flipping his boat. Raoul barely made it to shore. His hair turned white that night, and he never returned to the river after sunset again. Locals say La Llorona de Agua Clara does not seek her own children anymore. She wants to give her child to someone else, to pass on the curse. If you accept it, the river will claim you, and you will take her place, forever drifting through the dark waters with your arms full of nothing. And still, deeper into the jungle, there is another story, one that the people tell only after making an offering to the forest itself, for there is a spirit there who listens, and he does not like being spoken of without respect. They call him El Dueño del Monte, the Lord of the Mountain. He is not human, though he often appears as one. A tall man with skin the color of rich earth, eyes like green fire, and a crown of twisted vines and flowers that never wilt. He is the guardian of the wild places, the one who decides if you may pass through the forest alive. Hunters who fail to ask his permission sometimes find their paths leading in circles, no matter which way they walk. Others hear laughter in the trees, followed by the sudden silence of every bird and insect, a silence that means you are no longer alone. One logger told me of how he and his crew ignored the old warnings, cutting down a ceiba tree said to be sacred. That night, they camped in the forest, their fire burning low. One by one, each man woke to the sound of footsteps. A tall figure stepped into the firelight, his eyes blazing green, his breath smelling of flowers and decay. He said nothing, just pointed toward the path they had taken. By morning, every man who had swung an axe was gone. The rest of the crew found the ceiba tree standing again, whole and untouched, but with fresh blood on its roots. Those who respect El Dueño del Monte leave small offerings, tobacco, liquor, or the first fruit of the season, before entering his domain. Those who don't, sometimes never leave at all. But perhaps the most unsettling thing is this. Some say they have seen him far from the jungle, standing at the edge of cities, watching, waiting for the moment when the wild can reclaim what was stolen from it. From the green fire of the jungle's guardian, our steps lead north to the windswept deserts of Chihuahua, where the horizon seems endless and the nights are so clear you can see every star, and sometimes things that should not be there at all. They call it La Luz Mala, the evil light. Travelers across the desert sometimes report seeing a single bright light hovering far ahead of them, flickering like a lantern in the wind. It moves as if leading the way, always just far enough to keep you walking toward it. Some say it's the spirit of a lost soul, desperate to find its way home. Others say it's something far more sinister, luring travelers into the dark to claim them. One story tells of a truck driver named Emilio, who was crossing the desert late at night. His radio had died hours ago, and the only sound was the hum of the engine and the wind scraping against the cab. Then, in the distance, he saw it. A bright white light, low to the ground, pulsing gently. He thought it might be another vehicle, perhaps someone in trouble, so he slowed and followed it. The light drifted off the road and into the open desert. Against his better judgment, Emilio turned off the pavement and followed. The further he drove, the smoother the sand seemed beneath his tires, almost like a path had been made for him. But then his headlights caught something strange. There were no tire tracks ahead of him. None at all. The light suddenly flared, blinding him. When his vision cleared, he was alone in complete darkness. His truck engine dead, his phone useless. He wandered for hours before finding the road again. The next day, when he returned with help to retrieve his truck, it was gone. Only a set of deep, charred marks in the sand remained, as if the vehicle had been burned away. Locals say if you see La Luz Mala, you must never follow it. If it comes towards you, turn your back and walk the other way without looking. For once it knows your face, it will come again. And the second time, you won't escape. From the vast desert, our path drifts into the cold, stone corridors of history, deep within the old mining town of Real de Catorce. Here, under the cobbled streets, lie tunnels that once rang with the sound of picks and hammers. But when the mines closed, something else moved in. This is the tale of El Minero Sin Rostro, the faceless miner. The story begins in the late 1800s, when a miner named Mateo was trapped in a collapse deep underground. Rescue crews dug for 3 days before finding him, but when they pulled him free, his face was gone. Not torn away, not burned, simply smooth, like wet clay before it is shaped. Mateo never spoke again. He wandered the town at night until he vanished entirely. Now, people say that if you enter the old tunnels after dark, you might hear the rhythmic clang of a pickaxe. Sometimes you'll see a shadow moving in the flicker of your lantern, a man in tattered miner's clothes, his helmet lamp glowing faintly. If you get close enough to see his face, or where his face should be, he will reach for you. Those who are caught are said to wake up days later, wandering the streets with no memory and no face of their own. The few who claim to have escaped tell of a voice in the darkness, a whisper like gravel sliding down stone. One more. I need one more. From the mines, we travel east to the Gulf Coast, where the air smells of salt and decay, and storms can rise without warning. Off the shore of Campeche lies a stretch of sea the fishermen call El Mar de los Lamentos, the Sea of Laments. They say that in the 1700s, a Spanish galleon sank there during a hurricane, taking hundreds of sailors to the depths. The sea was so violent that night that their cries were said to echo across the water long after the ship disappeared. And even now, centuries later, on certain stormy nights, the voices return. One captain told of sailing through that stretch when a sudden fog surrounded his boat. The waves went still, the air heavy and unmoving. Then he heard it, faint at first, then louder. Men shouting orders, screaming for help, the crack of splintering wood. He saw lights in the fog, like lanterns swaying on invisible ships. And then he saw them, pale faces just below the water's surface, eyes wide and mouths open in silent screams. They pressed their hands against the hull, and the wood groaned as if under immense pressure. The captain turned his ship around and fled, swearing that for days afterward, he could still hear the knocking of those hands from beneath the deck at night. Fishermen say the Sea of Laments hungers for new souls to join its crew. If you hear voices out on the water, you must resist the urge to look for them, because if you meet their eyes, they will know you can hear them, and they will not stop calling until you answer. Our next path takes us into the highlands of Michoacán, where the cold air carries the scent of pine and the echoes of old songs. Here lives the story of La Mujer de las Campanas, the woman of the bells. She appears on nights when the wind is still, walking through the forest wearing a long black dress. Around her waist hangs a belt made of small bronze bells that chime softly with each step. Some say she is a lost nun, others a bride abandoned at the altar. But all agree on one thing: to hear her bells is a warning. A young woodcutter once followed the sound, thinking it might lead to someone in need. He saw her ahead on the path, her back turned, the bells glinting faintly in the moonlight. He called out, but she did not respond. When he drew closer, she slowly turned to face him, and he saw that her mouth was sewn shut with black thread. The bells began to ring faster, louder, until the forest seemed to vibrate with the sound. The man collapsed, clutching his ears, and when he awoke, he was lying outside his home with no memory of how he had gotten there. For the rest of his life, whenever the wind was still, he could hear faint bells following him, no matter where he went. It is said that the woman of the bells seeks to silence those who follow her, and if she chooses you, the ringing will never stop, not until you join her in the forest, forever walking, forever chiming. From the sound of the bells in Michoacán, our path winds to the misty valleys of Veracruz, where the mountains rise like black teeth against the sky. Here, in the village of Naulinco, there is a story mothers whisper to their children to keep them close after sunset. They speak of El Hombre del Sombrero Ancho, the man with the wide hat. He is always seen at a distance first, a tall figure in a dark suit, a wide-brimmed hat casting his face in shadow. He walks slowly through the streets at night, never speaking, never making a sound. Dogs do not bark at him, instead they whimper and hide. One young man, Arturo, swore he encountered him on his way home from a dance. The night was warm, the moon bright, when he noticed a shadow on the road ahead. At first, Arturo thought it was a neighbor, but as he got closer, the figure did not move aside. Instead, it seemed to grow taller, the brim of its hat widening until it blocked the moonlight entirely. When Arturo tried to speak, his voice caught in his throat. The man leaned forward slightly, and though his face was hidden in darkness, Arturo felt a pressure in his chest, like something was trying to pull his breath out through his mouth. His vision blurred, and he fell to the ground. He woke up hours later at his doorstep, with no memory of how he got there. That night, he dreamed of the hat, vast, black, and spinning above him like a whirlpool. The elders say that those the Hat Man visits will see him again, and each time he stands a little closer, until one night he will be near enough to touch your face. From Veracruz, we travel west to the rugged Sierras of Durango, where a forgotten mining settlement hides the last of our tales for tonight. This is the legend of La Niña de Plata, the Silver Girl. Long ago, the mine in this town produced some of the purest silver in Mexico. But with wealth came greed, and one owner demanded the workers dig deeper and faster, ignoring the risk of collapse. Among the miners was a little girl named Isela, who worked alongside her father, carrying water and tools. One day, the mine gave way, burying dozens, including Isela. The rescue teams worked for a week before giving up. But then strange things began to happen. Miners who stayed late would hear the sound of small footsteps echoing in the tunnels, followed by the faint laughter of a child. Sometimes, a pale girl in a silver dress would appear just ahead, beckoning with a finger before vanishing around a corner. One night, a group of men followed her, thinking perhaps she was the ghost of someone who could lead them to hidden silver. They carried lanterns deep into the mine, but the deeper they went, the stronger the smell of wet earth became. Then, without warning, the tunnel behind them collapsed, sealing them in darkness. When the search party finally found them days later, the men were sitting in a circle, staring blankly ahead. Their hair had turned white, their skin cold to the touch, and none of them spoke again. The mine was abandoned soon after. But some nights, when the moon is full, people say they see a little girl in silver walking the road to the mine, her footsteps leaving small glittering marks in the dirt. If you follow them, they disappear after the third step. And so it is said, will you? From the lonely road to the abandoned mine, our journey takes us south, into the shadow of the ancient ruins scattered across Yucatan. Here the air is thick with the smell of earth and limestone, and every stone seems to remember a time before memory itself. This is where people whisper about La Mujer de Uxmal. They say she walks among the ruins when the moon is full, tall, with skin like polished stone and eyes that glow faintly in the darkness. Her hair hangs long and wet, as if she has just stepped out of the cenotes. Some believe she is the guardian of a forgotten temple, cursed to wander forever in search of something she lost. A group of tourists once decided to stay past closing, hoping to capture photographs of the ruins lit only by the moon. Around midnight, one of them spotted a woman standing at the top of the pyramid of the magician. She raised her arm slowly, pointing toward the forest. Curious, they followed the direction she indicated, moving deeper into the trees until they found a hidden well. The water inside shimmered strangely, reflecting not their faces, but scenes they did not recognize. Blood on stone, shadows dancing in torchlight, and a woman screaming. Suddenly the water began to churn, and something cold brushed against their ankles. Only 2 of the group made it back to the village, both shivering despite the heat, unable to speak for days. When they finally could, they each told the same story. The woman had followed them home, her glowing eyes watching from the edge of the forest every night until they left Yucatan. From Yucatan's ancient stones, we return north to the quiet streets of Guanajuato, where colorful houses sit over a maze of underground tunnels. Here, death is never far from life, and some believe it walks openly among the living. This is the legend of La Novia que Espera, the bride who waits. They say she stands at the steps of the Templo de San Diego in a faded white dress, holding a bouquet of dried flowers. She appears at dusk when the bells of the church ring and gazes toward the Jardin de la Unión as if searching for someone. If you approach her, she will smile faintly and ask if you've seen her groom. One man, a student walking home late, stopped to speak with her. She told him her wedding was supposed to be that day, but her fiancé never came. She asked if he could walk her home. Feeling sorry for her, he agreed. She led him into one of the narrow alleys and down a set of steps into the tunnels beneath the city. The air grew cold, and the sound of their footsteps echoed unnaturally. Then, the light from the entrance faded, and he realized he could no longer see her face, only the white of her dress. She began to walk faster, the flowers crumbling in her hands, until they were deep in the dark. When he finally turned to run, she was already behind him, her face pale and sunken, her bouquet now made of bones. They found him the next morning, unconscious on the steps of the church. He never returned to Guanajuato, but friends say that on quiet nights, he still wakes to the sound of distant church bells and the faint scent of dried flowers in the air. And so, our journey through these shadows ends where it began, in the heart of Mexico, where stories live not only in books or voices, but in the stones, the waters, and the winds themselves. These legends endure because they are more than tales. They are warnings. And if you travel to these places, remember to listen. Remember to look over your shoulder. And above all, remember that some stories do not end when the telling is over.